My name is Elias Hawthorne. I am 74 years old, and until recently, I considered myself a happy man. I was born in the small town of Willowbrook, Ohio, to a farmer who had a lifelong dream that his son would build houses instead of plowing fields. My father was right. I became a civil engineer and worked for 42 years for a company that built shopping centers all over the Midwest. The work was good, steady, and allowed me to support my family and save for my old age. My wife's name was Beatrice, a name as rare and beautiful as she was. We met at the University of Ohio, where she was studying literature, and I was studying engineering. Beatrice was the kind of woman who could turn an ordinary home into a place you wanted to be. She worked as a librarian at the local school, loved to read, and always knew what book to give a child to make them love reading. She had soft brown hair that she never dyed, and a habit of fixing her glasses when she was nervous. We lived together for 45 years. During that time, we had a daughter, Amelia, our only child, and we poured all our love and hopes into her. Amelia was a smart girl, studied well, played the piano, danced. Beatrice took her to all circles and sections. I helped her with math and physics. We thought we had given her everything she needed for a good life. After college, Amelia moved to Cleveland, got a job at an advertising agency, called every week, came to visit for the holidays. We were proud of her career, delighted when she told us about new projects and accomplishments. At 34, she married Harlan Voss, a man 6 years older who worked as a financial consultant. The wedding was lavish. We spent a lot of money on it, but we were happy to see our daughter married. The last 6 years of our lives had changed. It had been subtle at first, Amelia calling less often, finding excuses not to come over for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Harlan was always there when she called, and I could feel her choosing her words as if someone was listening. Beatrice was worried, trying to find out what was wrong, but her daughter assured us that everything was fine, just a lot of work. Then Beatrice was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis sounded like a verdict. The doctor said that there was only a year left. We didn't hide it from Amelia. We told her right away. She came, cried, promised to visit more often. But the promises remained words. During the 7 months of Beatrice's illness, her daughter came only 3 times, on her mother's birthday, and when her condition deteriorated sharply in early spring, I took care of my wife on my own. I learned to cook her favorite dishes, although she ate almost nothing. I read aloud to her the books she had loved in her youth. We often sat on the veranda, holding hands and reminiscing about the past. Beatrice never complained of pain, though I could see her agonizing. She was more worried about Amelia's estrangement from us. We must have done something wrong. She told me on those long nights when the pain kept her awake. I didn't know what to say. We had given our daughter a good education, supported her in all her endeavors, never restricted her freedom. What could we have done wrong? In recent weeks, Beatrice had become quite ill. I hired a nurse, but most of the time I was with my wife myself. She became light, transparent, as if she were about to disappear into thin air. We hardly spoke at all. She was saving her strength, and I didn't know what to talk about. Everything important we'd said to each other in those 45 years. Amelia called once a week, asking about her mother's condition, but I could hear the formality in her voice as if she were performing an unpleasant duty. When I mentioned that Beatrice was getting worse, the daughter would reply, "Hang in there, Daddy," and quickly ended the conversation. I understood that she was afraid that her mother's death might disrupt some of her plans. The day before Beatrice died, the doctor told me the end was near. I called Amelia and explained the situation. She said she would try to come, but Harlan had an important meeting with clients and she couldn't leave him alone. I didn't insist. I realized that my daughter's priorities had long since been set not in our favor. Beatrice died at dawn on Saturday, May 15th. I held her hand as she took her last breath. No one else was there. My wife, who had spent her life surrounding herself with people, reading to children, helping neighbors, had passed away alone except for me. It was wrong, but there was nothing to be done. After the doctor had pronounced her dead, and the funeral home had taken Beatrice's body away, I was alone in a house that was suddenly too big and too quiet. The clock in the kitchen ticked louder than usual. The refrigerator hummed like a tractor. I sat down in Beatrice's chair, the same one where she liked to read in the evenings, and tried to collect my thoughts. There was a lot to do. Organizing the funeral, notifying the relatives, sorting out the paperwork. But first of all, I had to call Amelia. I dialed her number at 10 in the morning. The ringing seemed endless, and I was about to hang up when my daughter finally answered. Her voice was sleepy. Apparently, I'd woken her up on a Saturday. "Hi, Daddy," she said, yawning, in the background. I heard Harlan's voice mumbling something about coffee. "Amelia." I began and felt my throat constrict. Simple words were suddenly hard to pronounce. "Your mom died this morning around 7. There was a pause. I could hear my daughter breathing into the tube. A closet door slamming somewhere. "Oh," she finally said. Not, "Oh my God." Not, "How did that happen?" Just, "Oh," as if I had informed her that the store was out of milk. "Amelia," I interjected, thinking the connection had broken. "Yeah, I'm here." "Dad, it's sudden." Sudden, I mean, we'd been talking about Beatrice dying for 7 months. The doctors warned us that time was short. How could it be sudden? "The funeral will be on Tuesday," I said, "at St. Andrew's Church at 11 Thorough in the morning. Can you make it?" There was a pause. This time I heard Harlan's voice clearly. "Honey, what's wrong?" And then my daughter's whisper, "Mom's dead." "Daddy," Amelia said, and there was a note in her voice that I knew well. It was the tone she'd used as a child when she'd asked permission not to do her homework or skip music lessons. "You see, it's Harlan's birthday on Tuesday. We've already planned everything, invited friends over. I was wondering if we could move the funeral to Wednesday." I stared at the wall opposite where a picture of our family, me, Beatrice, and little Amelia on a beach in Florida hung. My daughter was about 12 years old at the time, smiling as she hugged us both around our necks. A little girl would never choose her birthday over her own mother's funeral. "You want to postpone your mother's funeral because of your husband's birthday," I slowly muttered, not believing my own ears. "Well, not because of," Amelia said hastily. "It would just be more convenient. We have the restaurant booked, the cake ordered. And then Mom won't find out. Will she?" The last words sounded defiant, as if her daughter was defending herself against unfair accusations. "True. I agreed. Your mother really won't find out. But I will know. And you'll know. And Harlan will know. Dad, don't be so dramatic. It's only 1 day apart. Just 1 day apart. Between mother and husband. Between duty and convenience. Between the family that gave you life and the man who gave you comfort." "Okay," I said. "The funeral stays on Tuesday. If you can't make it, I understand. Don't be mad at me." "Dad, I'll be sure to come to the grave later. Put flowers." I hung up the phone before I finished. My hands were shaking, a lump in my throat. Beatrice had been in agony for 7 months. And her daughter can't sacrifice 1 birthday for her mother's funeral. Can't cancel a restaurant and a cake for one last goodbye to the woman who carried her under her heart, gave birth to her, raised her, loved her unconditionally. I got up and walked around the house. Beatrice's glasses were on the nightstand in the bedroom, and in the kitchen was her favorite cup inscribed, "Best Mom in the World." A gift from Amelia last Mother's Day. Now that inscription seemed a cruel irony. The phone rang again. "Amelia," I thought, deciding to apologize, but the screen popped up with my brother Reginald's number from Indiana. "Elias, I'm sorry for your loss," he said. "Beatrice was a wonderful woman. Miriam and I will come to the funeral." I told him about the funeral, about what needed to be done. Reginald offered to help with the arrangements. I agreed. It's good to have people who understand what family and duty are all about. After talking to my brother, I called a neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, who was friends with Beatrice. She immediately offered to help with the wake, bringing food, setting the table. Then Pastor Whitaker called, offered condolences, and discussed the details of the service. People responded, offering support, all except the one who should have been there in the first place. In the evening, I sat on the porch where Beatrice and I had spent the last few months and thought about how little I knew my own daughter. When did she become like this? When had she learned to prioritize so coldly and calculatingly, and why hadn't I noticed? Maybe Beatrice and I did do something wrong. Maybe we spoiled Amelia too much, didn't teach her to sacrifice her own desires for others. Or maybe it was Harlan who gradually poisoned her mind with his values. Either way, the woman who bore and raised Amelia would leave this world without a goodbye from her own daughter. And that was Amelia's choice, her conscious decision. Now I had to live with that knowledge and decide what to do next. Tuesday was gray and rainy, just the right weather for a funeral. I woke up at 5 in the morning, unable to lie in bed, which seemed huge and empty without Beatrice. I put on the black suit I'd bought for my nephew's wedding 6 years ago, and put on the tie Beatrice had given me last Christmas. In the mirror, I looked like an old man with gray hair and deep wrinkles around his eyes. When did I get so old? More people gathered at St. Andrew's than I expected. Neighbors came, former colleagues of Beatrice's from the school library, women from her book club, couples we'd been friends with. Many worked with her in a charity that helped low-income families buy textbooks. I looked at those faces and realized Beatrice had left a mark on so many people's lives. All of them took the time to see her off on her final journey. Brother Reginald came with his wife Miriam and 2 grown sons. We were not very close to him. We lived in different states and saw each other only once a year. But he was there for me. He helped with the arrangements, took care of the funeral home, made a list of people to call. Miriam brought food for the wake and ran the kitchen like it was her home all day. Pastor Whitaker conducted a beautiful service. He had known Beatrice a long time, baptized Amelia, married us in this same church 44 years ago. He spoke of what a kind person she left us, how much love she gave to those around her. He told about her work in the library, how she read books to children in the hospital, helped adults learn the computer. Listening to him, I was proud of my wife and at the same time felt a sharp pain from the fact that her daughter was not near the coffin. Several times during the service, I looked back at the front door, hoping to see Amelia. Maybe she had changed her mind, canceled Harlan's birthday party, come to say goodbye to her mother. But the door remained closed. The only daughter didn't come to her own mother's funeral. After the service, we drove to the cemetery. The rain intensified. We had to hold umbrellas to keep from getting wet. The coffin with Beatrice's body was slowly being lowered into the ground next to her parents' grave. I threw a handful of earth and thought about the fact that in a few years I would be lying next to her. Would Amelia be standing by my grave then, or would she have more important things to do again? The wake was held at our house. People ate, told stories about Beatrice, shared memories. Mrs. Hargrove recalled how my wife taught her grandson to read when the boy was having trouble in school. A former colleague told of how Beatrice organized a collection of books for an orphanage. Each story showed a new side of her, and I realized I didn't know everything about the woman I'd lived with for almost half a century. "Where's Amelia?" one of the ladies from the book club asked. I thought she was coming. "She had business to attend to," I answered succinctly, and the woman realized it was best not to pursue the topic. By evening, The guests had dispersed. Reginald and his family stayed behind to help put away the dishes and tidy up the house. Miriam put the plates in the dishwasher and tried several times to start a conversation about Amelia. But I responded with one-word answers. I didn't feel like discussing my daughter, even with my own brother. "You know," Reginald said when we were alone in the living room, "sometimes kids disappoint. It doesn't mean we're bad parents." I looked at him. His sons had both come to their aunt's funeral, even though they lived far away and took time off work. One of them had even brought a 3-year-old he barely knew. What could he possibly understand about my situation? Amelia didn't come to her mother's funeral. I said, "Chose her husband's birthday." Reginald wrinkled his nose. "Really, I thought she had something serious going on." "She did. She's forgotten what family is." His brother remained silent. What was there to say? Some things need no comment. After they left, I was alone in the house that was now mine alone. Beatrice was gone. Amelia had shown me that she was kind of gone, too. I walked around the rooms, turning the lights on and off, checking the locks. Everything was in its place, but the house seemed foreign. On the kitchen table was a stack of condolence cards. Cards from friends and acquaintances who couldn't make it to the funeral. People wrote warm words about Beatrice, remembered her kindness and generosity. Reading these letters, I thought about the fact that my wife was loved by many. It was a pity that they did not include my own daughter. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay in bed listening to the sounds of an empty house. A faucet dripped somewhere. The floorboards creaked. The wind moved the branches of the tree outside the window. I thought of Beatrice, of how she had died, holding my hand. I thought of Amelia, who at that moment was probably blowing out the candles on her husband's cake. And gradually, a decision matured in me that seemed the only right thing to do in this situation. 4 days after the funeral, I called Jasper Thornton, the lawyer who had handled Beatrice and me for 22 years. Jasper was Amelia's age, but he looked older than his years, balding with thick-rimmed glasses and a perpetually serious expression. His father had once helped me buy a house. Jasper himself had drafted our will 12 years ago. "Mr. Hawthorne, my condolences," he said as I entered his office on Main Street. "Mrs. Hawthorne was a remarkable woman. My mother often remembers how your wife helped her find a rare book in the library." I thanked him and got straight to the point. "Jasper, I need to change my will." He pulled out a file folder, put on his glasses, and looked at me carefully. "Sure. What exactly do you want to change everything?" I said, "Amelia will no longer be my heir." Jasper set the papers aside and took off his glasses. "Mr. Hawthorne, I understand you're going through a difficult time. Perhaps you should wait a few months before making any drastic decisions." "My daughter didn't attend her mother's funeral," I said calmly. "Preferred her husband's birthday. I no longer consider her my family." Jasper was silent, apparently mulling over my words. He had known our family for a long time, remembered Amelia as a little girl who sometimes came to the office with us. "And to whom do you want to leave your inheritance?" he finally asked. I pulled a piece of paper out of my pocket where I wrote down the names of the organizations. Half of the house and money to the children's reading charity Beatrice supervised. A quarter to the homeless animal shelter my wife always felt sorry for stray cats. The remaining quarter to the cancer fund. Jasper took notes, occasionally raising his eyes to me. And personal items. Photos. Mrs. Hawthorne's jewelry. I thought of Beatrice's wedding ring, which was now in my jewelry box. About her pearl necklace that she had gotten from her mother. About the family pictures of little Amelia smiling between us. Personal belongings to give to charities. 2. Let them sell it and spend the money on a good cause. Even pictures. Jasper writhed for a few minutes, then looked up. Mr. Hawthorne, I am obliged to warn you that your daughter can contest the will in court if she proves that you were not of sound mind or acted under duress. I am of perfect sanity. I interrupted him, and no one pressured me. I just think that a person who can't say goodbye to his dead mother doesn't deserve her inheritance. We discussed the details of the new will. Jasper explained how to draw up the documents properly so that they would be harder to challenge. He offered to bring in witnesses to do a psychiatric evaluation to prove my capacity. I agreed to everything. I wanted my judgment to be legally impeccable. When will Amelia find out about the new will? I asked. By law, the heirs must be notified within 30 days of the testator's death. Jasper replied. But if you'd like, I can send her a copy now, and... I shook my head. No, let her find out after I die. It would be a fitting surprise. Jasper grimaced at my tone, but said nothing. We agreed to meet in a week to sign the final will. Walking out of the lawyer's office, I felt strangely relieved. It was like a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't taking revenge on Amelia. I was simply drawing the logical conclusion from her actions. A person who puts her husband's birthday above her mother's funeral doesn't understand the value of family. Why would such a person want a family inheritance? At home, I sat down at Beatrice's desk and wrote a letter. Not to Amelia. I had no desire to explain myself to her. I wrote to myself, trying to make sense of my feelings. It didn't come out well. I'd never been a writer, unlike Beatrice, who sometimes composed poetry. Darling, I began, addressing my deceased wife, I changed my will today. Amelia will no longer get our house and our savings. I know you'd be upset. You always made excuses for our daughter. Always believed she'd make it right. But she didn't come to say goodbye to you. Chose cake in a restaurant over your funeral. I can't forgive that. Writing was difficult. Words jumbled. Thoughts racing. I crumpled up the sheets and started over. But each time I got the same thing. The pain, the disappointment, the sense of betrayal. In the end, I burned all the sketches in the fireplace. Beatrice was dead. She wouldn't read my letters. And I wasn't going to explain my decisions to the living. The next day, Amelia called. I saw her number on the phone screen and didn't answer. She called back an hour later. Then 2 more. Finally, she left a voicemail. Dad, it's me. I know you're angry, but let's talk. I couldn't make it to the funeral. We really had important plans. But I think about Mom every day. Call me back. Please. Important plans. My husband's birthday is more important than saying a final goodbye to my mother. I erased the message without listening to the end. A week later, I signed the new will in front of 2 witnesses, Mrs. Hargrove and Pastor Whitaker. Jasper read the main points again, making sure I understood the consequences of my decision. The document had been drawn up according to all the rules. It would be very difficult to contest it. Now, a copy of the will be kept in a safe deposit box, Jasper explained, and the duplicate will remain in my safe deposit box. I shook his hand and went outside. It was a warm June day. Apple trees were blooming and children were playing in the neighboring yards. Life went on despite Beatrice's death and Amelia's betrayal. The first months without Beatrice were the hardest. I would wake up in the morning and out of habit turn to her side of the bed. But no one was there. I brewed 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, bought her favorite yogurts from the store. My brain still hadn't gotten used to the fact that the woman I'd lived with for almost half a century was gone. The house seemed too big for one person. It had 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a living room where we used to have guests. Now there were no guests. I cooked only for myself, and I never went into Amelia's bedroom, which had stood empty for years. Sometimes I thought about selling the house and moving to a smaller apartment, but then I remembered that, in the new will, the house would still go to a charitable foundation. The neighbors were kind. Mrs. Hargrove brought home-cooked meals, casseroles, soups, pies every few days. She had been a widow for 16 years and understood what it meant to be alone after a long marriage. Mr. Donnelly from across the street helped with minor repairs, and his wife Daphne invited me over for family dinners on Sundays. "Don't stay home alone," she used to say. "Beatrice wouldn't want you to lock yourself away like a hermit." Daphne was right. Beatrice had always been sociable, loved people. She would make me go out, meet new people, find activities to my liking. But it was hard to do it without her. Amelia called every week. I didn't answer her calls, but I listened to her voice messages. At first, she apologized, explained why she couldn't make it to the funeral, and then she got angry, accused me of avoiding her. In one of her messages, she said, "Dad, this is stupid. Mom died, but we're alive. We need to support each other, not sulk like children. I know you're upset, but let's get together and talk about it. Support each other." Where was that support when Beatrice was dying? Where was that support when I was burying my wife alone? Over the summer, I started gardening. Beatrice was always planting flowers, tending roses, growing tomatoes and cucumbers. I never helped her. I thought gardening was a woman's occupation. Now I had to learn on my own. I read books on gardening, watched videos on the internet, asked neighbors for advice. Working in the garden turned out to be therapeutic. When I was digging, watering plants, or weeding, my thoughts became calmer. The physical fatigue helped me forget the heartache. By the end of the summer, Beatrice's garden was growing flowers again, but not as beautiful as they had been when she was there. In September, I joined the book club where Beatrice used to belong. The ladies welcomed me, even though I was the only man in the group. We met every 2 weeks, discussed the books we had read, drank tea and cookies. The conversations were shallow but pleasant. The women shared news about grandchildren, discussed movies and television shows, and sometimes reminisced about Beatrice. "She always had such a keen sense of books," said Evelyn Brooks, the club's oldest member, could explain why the author chose that particular ending, what he wanted to say between the lines. I listened to these stories and discovered new sides of the woman I'd lived half my life with. It turns out that Beatrice wrote reviews for the local newspaper, helped aspiring writers edit their manuscripts, even tried to write a novel herself, but didn't finish. In the fall, Amelia arrived unannounced. I was working in the garden removing fallen leaves when I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. I turned around and saw a familiar blue sedan. My daughter got out of the car, waved at me, and headed toward the house. She looked good, slim, well-groomed, wearing an expensive coat and leather boots. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, and there were faint wrinkles around her eyes. She was 39, but she looked younger. "Hi, Daddy," she said, stopping a few feet away from me. I could sense the uncertainty in her voice. "Amelia," I replied, leaning on the rake. "What brings you to our area? Wanted to talk to you." "You're not answering your cell phone. I don't see what we have to talk about." She wrinkled her nose as if in physical pain. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't make it to Mom's funeral. I really am. But you can't cut off communication because of that." "Yes, you can," I said calmly. "Turns out you can." We stood in the garden that Beatrice loved so much and looked at each other like strangers, my daughter, whom I had taught to ride a bicycle, read bedtime stories too, escorted to first grade, stood before me and apologized for not attending her own mother's funeral, and I realized I couldn't forgive her. "Why don't we go inside?" Amelia suggested. "It's cold outside." I nodded and walked toward the house without waiting for her. In the hallway, she took off her coat and hung it on the coat rack, the same place where Beatrice's jacket had once hung. The gesture was so familiar, as if she still lived here. "Do you want coffee?" I asked out of habit. "Yes, thank you." I put the kettle on. Pulling out 2 mugs, Amelia walked into the living room, looking around. A lot had changed since her last visit. I'd put away some of the photos, rearranged the furniture, taken the figurines Beatrice collected off the shelf. "The house looks different," my daughter said when I brought the coffee. "A lot has changed since your mother died." She pressed her lips together. "Daddy, can we finally talk normally without these barbs?" I sat down in my chair. The same one where I spent evenings with Beatrice. "Talk." Amelia set her mug on the coffee table and turned to me. "I realized what I did was wrong. I should have canceled Harlan's birthday party and come to the funeral. But you know how he is. He doesn't like it when plans change at the last minute." "I know." I agreed. "Harlan doesn't like it when something doesn't go according to his script." "Don't say that. He's a good man. Just organized. Organized. A good word to describe a man who wouldn't let his wife say goodbye to her dead mother." "Tell me about that day," I asked. "About Harlan's birthday." Amelia looked confused. "What exactly everything? How the celebration went? Was he happy?" She was quiet for a moment, apparently trying to figure out where I was going with this. "We went to a restaurant with some friends, ordered a cake. Harlan got presents, a watch from me, a golf book from Jeremiah, a bottle of whiskey from Stuart. Just an ordinary birthday. And were you happy?" "What do you mean? Just answer. Were you happy the day your mother was buried?" Amelia turned away to the window. It was starting to get dark outside. The streetlights were being turned on. "I've been thinking about Mom all day long. I've been thinking about her. But she didn't come." "She didn't come," she repeated quietly, "and I regret it." "Do you regret not coming, or do you regret that I'm angry with you?" The question sounded harsher than I'd planned. Amelia turned to me and I saw tears in her eyes. "I wish I hadn't come," she said. "I really do. Daddy, if it were possible to get that day back. But you can't. You can't." She agreed. "But you can fix things between us. We're a family." Family. The words sounded strange in her mouth. When was the last time she'd acted like family, when she didn't call out of courtesy? But because she missed you. When had she come over just to spend time with her parents? "Family isn't just blood," I said. "It's loyalty, mutual aid, a willingness to sacrifice your own interests for your loved ones. You've shown that you have other priorities. I have a husband, a life of my own. That's fine. That's fine. But then don't talk about family." Amelia stood up and started pacing the room. "What do you want me to do?" "Dad, for me to divorce Harlan, move in with you, devote the rest of my life to you. I want you to be honest with yourself and with me." "I am honest." "Then tell me. If I died tomorrow and Harlan had an important client meeting the day after tomorrow, would you come to my funeral?" The question hung in the air. Amelia stopped in the middle of the room and stared at me. I could see her thinking, weighing the answer. And that was the best characterization of our relationship. A daughter couldn't answer offhand whether or not she'd come to her father's funeral. "Of course I would come," she finally said, but her voice sounded unconvinced. "Of course," I repeated. "Like you came to your mother's funeral." She sat back down, covering her face with her hands. "Dad, I don't know what to say. Yes, I did wrong, but people make mistakes. Some mistakes can't be undone. So, you'll never forgive me." I looked at my daughter, a grown woman who was crying in her late mother's chair. Amelia, whom Beatrice and I had loved so much, whom we had given the best years of our lives to, who had grown up to be a stranger. "I'll forgive you," I said. "When you realize exactly what you've done, I understand." "No. You understand that I'm angry. They're different things." Amelia spent another hour trying to convince me to resume communication. She talked about her job, her future plans, how Harlan had gotten a promotion. I listened politely, answering one-word answers. Finally, she realized the conversation had reached a dead end. "I'll go," my daughter said, getting up. "But I'll call and come over. Sooner or later, you'll thaw out." After she left, I sat in the living room for a long time thinking about our conversation. Amelia genuinely thought she had made a minor mistake that could be fixed with an apology and time. She didn't realize that choosing between her husband's birthday and her mother's funeral wasn't a mistake, but an indicator of character. And my new will was a logical consequence of that choice. That night, I didn't sleep well. I lay in bed and remembered how I had met Beatrice. It was in 1969 at the University of Ohio. I was a third-year engineering student, and she was a sophomore in the English literature department. We met in the library where I was looking for a textbook on material resistance, and she was working a part-time job helping students find the books they needed. Engineering. She asked when she saw the title of the book. Serious stuff, building bridges and skyscrapers, shopping centers. I corrected. Bridges are for other engineers. She laughed. Beatrice had an amazing laugh, ringing, genuine, infectious. And I thought all engineers dreamed of building bridges like in the movies. We got to talking. Turns out she's from a small town in Michigan, like me from Ohio. Her father worked at the post office. Her mother taught elementary school. Beatrice was the first in her family to go to university. She studied on a scholarship, worked part-time at the library and as a waitress at a coffee shop. "I want to be a teacher," she told me, "or work in a library. I love books. I want to help others love them." It seemed to me then that we had little in common. I was studying the exact sciences. She the humanities. I was planning a career in a big company. She dreamed of working with children. But something about her attracted me. Maybe the sincerity with which she talked about her plans, or the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her favorite books. The first date was awkward. I asked her to the movies to see a movie with Paul Newman, but I was silent the whole way, not knowing what to talk about. Beatrice was also shy, answering in short phrases. After the movie, we went to a cafe for coffee, and there the ice finally melted. She talked about a book she'd read, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and spoke so passionately about injustice and prejudice that I listened. "Have you read it?" she asked. I shook my head. "No time. Studying takes up all my time. Make sure you read it. It's an amazing book about the importance of protecting the weak." The next day, I borrowed the book from the library. I read it in the evenings after class. The story of the Girl Scout and her father, Atticus Finch, gripped me. When I returned the book to Beatrice, we talked into the night discussing the characters and their actions. "You see," she said, "books help you understand people, including yourself." And so our love began. Beatrice gave me books. I read and retold her my impressions. She opened the world of literature to me, taught me to see the beauty of words. I showed her how buildings are organized, explained the principles of structures. We complemented each other. We got married 2 years later, right after my graduation. The wedding was modest. My parents, a few friends, a simple white dress and a bouquet of wildflowers. We honeymooned in a small cabin in Michigan. They read, walked in the woods, talked about the future. "I want 3 children," Beatrice confessed, lying on my shoulder on the lake shore. 2 boys and a girl. "And I want a house with a big garden," I replied, "so the children can play outdoors." We made plans, dreamed, believed that a long, happy life lay ahead. And for the first few years, I got a job in a construction company. Beatrice worked in the school library. We rented a small apartment and saved money for a house. Amelia was born 4 years after we were married. The labor was difficult. The doctor said the next children were unlikely. We were upset, but we didn't despair. "But we will give all the love to one," said Beatrice, holding her newborn daughter to her chest. And we did give her all our love. Amelia was the center of our world. When she was sick, we took turns at her crib. When she started school, we helped her with her homework. When she got into music, we bought a piano and paid for lessons, even though money was tight. "She's going to be special," Beatrice said, as she listened to Amelia play a children's piece. "I have a feeling she will be—" Beatrice was right. Amelia was indeed special. Smart, talented, beautiful. She did well academically, participated in school plays, had many friends. We were proud of our daughter, taking her to all the events, supporting her in all her endeavors. When Amelia entered college, we felt like successful parents. We gave our child a good upbringing and education, prepared her for independent life. She left to study marketing in Cleveland. We were left alone in an empty house. "It's just us again," Beatrice said the day her daughter left. "Just like in the beginning," I replied, hugging my wife. We thought we had many more years together ahead of us, that we'd grow old side by side, babysitting grandchildren, traveling in retirement. We didn't know that in 14 years Beatrice would die of cancer and Amelia wouldn't come to her funeral, lying in bed that sleepless night. I tried to figure out where we'd gone wrong. Maybe we'd spoiled our daughter too much, not teaching her the value of family. Or was it Harlan who'd changed her character, or maybe Amelia had always been selfish? It just wasn't as noticeable when she was a child. I never found the answer. All I knew was that the girl who'd grown up in our house and the woman who'd sat in the living room yesterday were different people, and my new will reflected that sad reality. Harlan Voss came into Amelia's life just as Beatrice's first health problems began. That was 5 years ago. Her daughter was 35, working at an advertising agency and renting an apartment in a nice neighborhood in Cleveland. She'd had relationships with various men before, but nothing serious. Beatrice and I were beginning to worry that daughter would stay single like this. Met an interesting man. Amelia reported in one of our weekly phone conversations. Name's Harlan, works as a financial advisor. Very smart and successful. Beatrice rejoiced. "When are we going to meet him soon?" Her daughter promised. "He works hard, but I'll be sure to bring him around." Harlan did work hard. When Amelia finally brought him to us, it was clear why. He was the kind of man for whom money was the main value in life. Tall, thin, with neatly cut hair and an expensive suit. He spoke quickly and assertively, often mentioning prices, salaries, the value of various things. "Beautiful house," he said as he entered our living room. "What year was it built?" "What's the market value now?" I answered reluctantly. I didn't like it when strangers appraised our house as a commodity. Over lunch, Harlan talked about his work, helping people invest money, plan for retirement, buy insurance. All the conversations revolved around finances. When Beatrice tried to talk about books, he politely replied that he only read professional literature. "No time for fiction books," he explained. "One has to keep abreast of changes in the market." Amelia listened to him with admiration. It was evident that she was proud of her man, of his knowledge and success. But it seemed to me that she had become somewhat artificial around him, choosing her words more carefully, laughing at his jokes that weren't funny, agreeing with his opinions even when they contradicted her earlier views. "Harlan says public school work is a dead end," Amelia said when Beatrice talked about the new children's reading program. "Private companies pay a lot more." Beatrice looked at her daughter in surprise. "But it's not just about the money. Is it working with children is satisfying?" "Satisfaction doesn't pay the bills," Harlan interjected with a condescending smile. "Though, of course, everyone chooses their own priorities." There was a sense of superiority in his tone, of a man who considered money the only measure of success. Beatrice fell silent, and I saw her lips quiver. My wife has spent her life helping children to love reading. putting her heart into her work. And this man actually called her profession worthless. After they left, Beatrice was silent for a long time. We were washing dishes in the kitchen. She mechanically wiped the plates with a towel. "What do you think of Harlan?" she finally asked. I chose my words carefully. "He's determined. I think he looks at Amelia as a beautiful thing. You know how people buy an expensive car not to travel but to impress?" Beatrice was perceptive. I too noticed the way Harlan showed off Amelia, talking about her accomplishments at work, boasting about her looks, mentioning how much money she made. It was as if she was his investment portfolio. In the following months, the changes in his daughter's behavior became more noticeable. She called less often, and when she did, the conversations were short and formal. She stopped coming over on weekends, citing busyness, brought Harlan over for Thanksgiving, but they only stayed a few hours. "We have a client meeting on Friday," Harlan explained. "We need to get ready on Thanksgiving." Beatrice wondered. "Money doesn't sleep." He replied with the same condescending smile. Amelia was silent, but I could see she was uncomfortable. She used to love family gatherings, helping her mom cook, playing board games for hours, talking about work and friends. Now she sat next to Harlan and looked at her watch. When they had announced their engagement, Beatrice had tried to be happy. "The important thing is that Amelia is happy," she told me in the evenings, but I could hear the anxiety in her voice. The wedding had cost us a lot of money. Harlan had insisted on an expensive restaurant, fresh flowers, a professional photographer. "A wedding is an investment in reputation," he explained. "Clients look at things like that." Amelia wanted a more modest ceremony, but relented. I remember her standing there in her $25,000 wedding dress, looking more anxious than happy. Harlan acted like a director all day, telling the photographer where to shoot, organizing the guests, checking the bills. After the wedding, our relationship with our daughter became even more strained. Harlan bought a house in an upscale neighborhood. They made new friends in high society. Amelia started dressing more expensive, talking about brands and investments. At the same time, she was clearly feeling insecure in her new role. "Harlan signed me up for the country club," she recounted during rare phone calls. "They play golf and tennis there. You have to buy special clothes." "Do you like golf?" Beatrice asked. "Learning," replied her daughter without enthusiasm. Harlan methodically cut Amelia off from her old life, convinced her to change her job to one that paid better but was less creative, discouraged her from seeing old friends who didn't fit their new status, gradually isolated Yus's parents who were negatively impacting her career ambitions. "Your parents are good people," he would say as we heard scraps of their conversations on the phone. "But they don't understand the modern world. They live in the past." The worst part was that Amelia was beginning to agree with him. The woman who had grown up in a home full of love and support had become ashamed of her background. She stopped telling new acquaintances that her mother worked in the school library and her father built shopping centers. When Beatrice was diagnosed with cancer, Amelia came and cried, but within a week, Harlan began hinting that visiting her parents too often was interfering with her work and their social life. Gradually, the visits became less frequent, the calls shorter. "She's afraid," Beatrice tried to justify to her daughter. "Death scares young people." But I realized it wasn't about fear of death. The point was that Harlan had reformatted Amelia's value system. Family had become a hindrance to her career, her mother's illness an inconvenient circumstance that disrupted her plans. And the final chord was the choice between her husband's birthday and her mother's funeral. A choice that showed who my daughter had become under the influence of a man for whom people were only assets in a personal balance sheet. In the spring of this year, a month before Beatrice's death, Amelia gave us the news that finally set the stage. She called on a Wednesday evening as I was spoon-feeding Beatrice. She was barely able to eat on her own anymore. "We have news," the daughter said after the usual questions about her mother's health. Harlan got a job offer in Portland. A very good offer. Beatrice, who had been lying in bed with her eyes closed, opened them and looked at me. I put her on speakerphone so she could hear the conversation. "Congratulations," I said gently. "Are you planning on moving, too?" "Of course. I have prospects there. 2. Harlan's already made arrangements with an agency. The salary will be 1.5 times as much." Portland was a 10-hour drive from our little town. In fact, that meant we'd see our daughter at most once a year. "When's the move?" Beatrice asked in a weak voice. "August. We have to sell the house, find a new one, do the paperwork, lots of things to do." August, 4 months from now. Beatrice might not live to see her daughter move in, but even if she did, she'd spend the last weeks or months of her life separated from her only child. "Amelia," Beatrice said, pulling herself together. "Can't we postpone the move? You see, I might not have much time left." There was a pause. I could hear my daughter breathing into the tube, music playing somewhere in the background. "Mom, you realize this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Harlan. Offers like this happen once in a lifetime. We can't because you're sick, because of your illness." As if cancer were Beatrice's whim, an inconvenience that interfered with her son-in-law's career plans. "Of course," Beatrice replied quietly. "I understand. We'll be visiting." Amelia hastened to add, "For holidays, for weekends. It's not a long plane ride. It's a short plane ride, but we all realized that the cancer-stricken woman wouldn't wait to visit for the holidays." After that conversation, Beatrice hardly spoke for days. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, sometimes crying quietly. I tried to comfort her, saying that young people have the right to build their own lives. But we both knew the truth. Amelia was leaving her dying mother for money. "I want to write her a letter," Beatrice said one morning. One last letter. I brought her a notebook and pen. She wrote slowly, stopping often to rest. She started again several times, crumpling the pages. Finally, she finished and handed me the letter. "Read it," she asked. I read aloud in a trembling voice. "My dear Amelia, when you were born, I held you in my arms and thought there was nothing in the world more important than this little miracle. Daddy and I gave you all our love, hoping to raise a good person. Probably we were wrong somewhere, but I still love you and will always love you. I wish you happiness in your new life. Try to remember us sometimes. Your mom." "Will you send it?" Beatrice asked. I nodded, though there was a lump in my throat. The letter was a farewell. A mother saying goodbye to her daughter who was leaving before she died. Amelia replied a week later. Short formal. "Thank you for the letter. Mother, I love you too. Take care." Not a word about postponing the move. Not a hint of understanding of what was going on. In June, they visited for one day. Amelia brought papers to sell the house, showed Beatrice pictures of the new town. Harlan talked about the new job, the career opportunities, how they were taking it to the next level. "Are you going to miss us?" Beatrice asked. "Of course," my daughter replied, but I could see she was thinking about something else, about boxes to be packed, papers to be processed. They left in the evening. Amelia kissed her mother on the forehead. "Goodbye. I'll see you soon," she said. But we all knew that wasn't true. "She's afraid to see me," Beatrice said as the car disappeared around the corner. "Afraid to watch me die." Perhaps Beatrice was right. Perhaps Amelia was indeed afraid. But fear was no excuse for indifference. Loving children don't abandon dying parents, even if it's scary. In July, Amelia called once a week, asked about her mother's health, told her about preparations for the move. Her voice sounded detached, as if she were performing an unpleasant duty. When Beatrice asked to talk about the new house, her daughter answered in a monosyllabic voice. "I think I'm already dead to her," my wife said after one such conversation. I didn't know what to say back because she was right. Amelia had mentally buried her mother already, cut her out of her new life. Physical death was just a formality. And when that formality came, the daughter predictably chose cake over a coffin, chose the future over the past. She chose Harlan over her mother. 3 months had passed since Amelia had received a letter from Jasper Thornton, a letter that turned her world upside down and made her realize the cost of her decisions. I learned of her reaction from the lawyer himself, who called me the day after the documents were sent. "Mr. Hawthorne," Jasper said, and you could feel the tension in his voice. "Your daughter called me yesterday. She was very upset." I waited silently for him to continue. "She demanded an explanation, accused me of influencing your decision, then she started threatening to sue, saying she'd prove your dementia." The conversation was unpleasant. "I'm sorry you had to listen to that," I said. "Amelia doesn't handle uncomfortable news well. She said she's coming to see you. Be prepared for an emotional conversation." Jasper was right. Amelia arrived that same evening. I heard the sound of the car at 9 as I was getting ready for bed. A minute later, fists pounded on the door. "Dad, open up. I need to talk to you." I slowly made my way to the door and opened it. On the threshold stood my daughter in an expensive coat with eyes red from tears and her hair disheveled. In her hand, she clutched a letter from a lawyer. "What does this mean?" she shouted, waving the paper. "You disinherited me because I didn't show up for the funeral." "Come on in," I said calmly. "The neighbors will hear." She stormed into the house, walked through the living room, turned to me with a furious face. "Explain to me what's going on. You got the letter. It explains everything. It doesn't explain anything. It says you left your house and money to some charities and nothing to me." Amelia paced the room, gesticulating, her voice trailing off. She was in a near hysterical state. "Sit down," I suggested. "Let's talk calmly." "Calmly?" she shrieked. "You stole my inheritance from me and I'm supposed to be calm." "Your inheritance," I interjected. "Interesting choice of words." She paused, looking at me. "What do you mean? You consider the house and the money yours, even though you haven't earned a penny of that wealth. I am your daughter. It's my right. A right Amelia spoke of inheritance as a right, not as a gift from loving parents, as if we owed her our property simply for the fact of being born. Sit down," I repeated more sternly, "or leave. Screaming in my house is not something I will allow you to do." She pressed her lips together but sat down in the chair opposite me. The letter trembled in her hands. "Daddy," she said, trying to speak more calmly. "I realize you're upset about the funeral, but that's no reason to disinherit me. Mom wouldn't have approved of that." "How do you know what Mom would have approved of?" "She loved me. She did. And you trampled on that love." Amelia sobbed. "I didn't mean to upset her. It's just circumstances were unfortunate. Circumstances were unfortunate." Amazing wording to describe the choice between her husband's birthday and her mother's funeral. "Tell me about the circumstances," I asked. "What prevented you from coming to the funeral?" She faltered. "Well, it was Harlan's birthday. We planned it in advance, booked a restaurant. So, you couldn't cancel. Important people were invited. Harlan's clients, co-workers. If we'd canceled at the last minute. So what, Harlan would have lost clients? Possibly. He says that in his business, reputation is everything. Reputation. So, Harlan's reputation was more important than the memory of his dead mother. "And your reputation?" I asked. Amelia lowered her eyes. Mom was already dead. She didn't care, and I cared. And the people who came to say goodbye to your mother cared. They asked where you were. What did you tell them that you had things to do? We were silent. The wind was howling outside the window. A clock ticking somewhere in the house. Amelia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Daddy," she said finally, "I know what I did was wrong, but you can't take everything away from me because of one mistake." One mistake. Well, maybe a few. A few mistakes. She still didn't realize the magnitude of what had happened. "Amelia," I said, looking into her eyes, "you barely visited your dying mother for 7 months. Moved to another state knowing she might not live to see you leave. Didn't show up to her funeral for your husband's birthday. And now you're talking about a few mistakes." She was silent, rubbing the edge of the letter. "You want me to change the will back?" I continued. "Okay, answer one question honestly. If I died tomorrow and Harlan had an important meeting the day after tomorrow, would you come to my funeral?" Amelia raised her eyes. Looking at me, I could see her thinking, weighing the answer. And in that pause was the answer to my question. "Of course I'd come," she said finally, but her voice sounded unconvincing. "Of course," I repeated sadly, "like you came to your mother's funeral." Amelia spent another 2 hours in the house trying to convince me to change the will. She cried, begged, promised to make it right. Then she made threats. Said she would go to court, prove my dementia, challenge the documents. I listened in silence, nodding occasionally. "Do you realize you're depriving me of my future?" she shouted. "Harlan and I were counting on that money. We were planning to buy a bigger house, have kids, planning to buy a house with my dead grandmother's money, to have kids with Grandpa's inheritance. For Amelia. Beatrice and I were not parents, but a source of funding." "What if I told Harlan the truth?" she said suddenly. "That you disinherited us? He might want a divorce." I looked at my daughter. A grown woman who was afraid her husband would leave her for money? So what wouldn't that show what kind of man he is? He's good, just practical. Practical? A good word to describe a man who married a woman for her future inheritance. "Amelia," I said tiredly, "go home. Think about our conversation. I'm not leaving until you promise to change your will. Then you can stay for life." She got up, walked across the room, stopped at the fireplace where the photograph stood, picked up a picture of her as a little girl sitting on Beatrice's lap. "Do you remember when my mother used to read me fairy tales?" she said quietly. "Every night. Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. I remember, and how you taught me how to ride a bicycle, running beside me, holding the saddle. I remember. We were a happy family, weren't we?" I look at the picture in her hands. Beatrice is smiling, hugging little Amelia. Both of them looked serenely happy. We didn't know then that the blonde-haired girl would grow up and not come to her mother's funeral. We were, I agreed, but you were a different person then. I'm the same. No. That girl wouldn't have chosen a cake over a coffin. Amelia put the picture back up, turning to me. "What would it take for you to forgive me, finally?" The right question. Not how to get the inheritance back, but how to earn forgiveness. "Become the person you were," I answered, "to remember what family is. But how, tell me specifically?" I thought, "How do you explain the basics of humanity to an adult? Divorce Harlan," I said finally. Amelia recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "What you heard me. Divorce the man who turned you into this. I can't. I love him, or love the comfort he provides." She opened her mouth to object, but no words came out. We both knew the answer. "Harlan didn't make you miss the funeral." I continued. "You chose his birthday yourself, but he created a value system where money was more important than people. and you accepted that system. He's a good husband. A good husband would let his wife say goodbye to her dying mother. Amelia was silent, rubbing her wedding ring, an expensive ring with a large diamond, a symbol of Harlan's success. "If I get divorced," she said quietly, "will you change the will?" "I don't know. We'll see what you become without it. And if I don't get divorced, then you'll be left with what you have. With a husband who values you as an asset and no parental blessing." She hesitated. I could see the calculation going on in her head. How much the divorce would cost, how much she would lose in property division, how much she could get from the inheritance. Even at this moment, she was thinking in numbers, as Harlan had taught her. "I need time to think," Amelia said finally. "You have time. I'm not going to die in the next few days." She gathered her purse, put on her coat, on the threshold. She turned around. "Dad, what if I just visit more often? Call every day. Help around the house?" "It wouldn't help. It's not about visiting more often. What is it about? It's about who you are. And as long as you're Harlan Voss's wife, you're not my daughter." She left without saying goodbye. I heard the car start as she drove off into the night. Perhaps forever. The next day, I got a call from Harlan. His voice sounded strained but polite. "Mr. Hawthorne, I need to talk to you." "Go ahead." "Amelia told me about the will. I think we can find a compromise." "Compromise?" The word sounded like a business proposal in his mouth. "What kind of compromise?" I asked. "You see, we're willing to change a few things. Amelia will visit you more often. We can help with the house, with the garden, maybe even move back to Ohio if it would help restore family relations." Harlan spoke with the tone of a businessman offering a deal. Visit his father in exchange for an inheritance. Move to another state for money. "And what are you personally willing to change?" "Mr. Voss?" I asked. A pause. "What do you mean you wouldn't let your wife say goodbye to your dying mother for your own birthday? What are you willing to do to remedy that I didn't forbid Amelia to go?" He answered cautiously. "It was her decision under your influence." "Mr. Hawthorne, I understand you're upset, but let's be practical. You can't change the past. You can only build the future." Practical. He was suggesting I be practical about his wife missing her own mother's funeral. "The future has already been built." I said, "Amelia made her choice. I made mine. But we can talk things over. Find a solution that will suit everyone." I hung up. Harlan called twice more, but I didn't answer. There was no point in talking to a man who thought his mother's death was a bargaining chip. A week later, Amelia came again. She didn't look well, gaunt with dark circles under her eyes. She sat down in the living room, silent for a long time. "I spoke to the lawyer," she said at last. "He said that the will is competently drafted. It would be very difficult to contest. Jasper is a good specialist. He also said you had a psychiatric evaluation, confirmed your capacity." "Confirmed." Amelia sighed. "So, you really did think this through beforehand? This isn't an impulsive decision. No, Dad." She started and fell silent. Then she tried again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the divorce." I waited, not answering. "If I divorce Harlan, is that a guarantee you'll change the will?" "No." She looked at me in surprise. "No, divorce is only the first step. You have to figure out what you'll become without it. What if I become the right person, but you still won't change the will? Then at least you'll be the right person." Amelia hesitated. "So, I'm not supposed to change for the money, but for me, you're finally starting to understand." She stood up, walking across the room. "It's hard. I've been living differently for 5 years now. I've gotten used to a certain standard of living, to people. to ways of thinking. Used to putting money before people. Yeah. She agreed quietly. I guess so. The first honest admission in a long time. Harlan's very upset, Amelia continued. Says that if I don't resolve the inheritance issue, it will affect our marriage. Is he threatening divorce? Not directly, but he's hinting. And how do you feel when he says that Amelia paused at the window, looking out at the garden where I was trying to keep Beatrice's flowers alive? Fear, she admitted. Fear of being alone. No money, no status, no familiar life. And love? Love of what do you feel? Love for a husband who threatens to leave you for money? A long pause. I think I've forgotten what love is. It was the most honest thing Amelia had said in all our conversations. Mom loved you, I said unconditionally, without demands, without conditions, even when you disappointed her. I know. And I loved up to a point. And now I looked at my daughter. A woman lost in someone else's values and trying to find her way home. Now I'm waiting to see who you become, I said. Whether my daughter will return or forever be Harlan Voss's wife. It's been 7 months since that conversation. It's April. The snow is melting outside my window, and the first sprouts of the tulips Beatrice planted in the garden are sprouting. I sit at her desk and write these lines. Not for anyone, but for myself. Trying to make sense of what has happened to our family. Amelia divorced Harlan in January. The process was painful. He took half of their joint property, including a house in an upscale neighborhood. The daughter was left with a small apartment and some of her savings. For a woman who had lived in luxury for 5 years, it was a shock for the first few months after the divorce. She called me every week, not asking for money, not mentioning the will, and she just told me about her new life. Got a job at a small ad agency, half the salary of her old job. Moved to a modest neighborhood. Learned to cook home-cooked meals instead of going to restaurants. You know, Dad, she said in one conversation. I forgot what it was like to live simply, to buy groceries by counting money, choosing clothes not by brand, but by comfort. There was no self-pity in her voice. It was more like wonder, like she was rediscovering the world. In February, Amelia came to Beatrice's birthday party. She brought a bouquet of tulips, her mother's favorite flowers, and placed them on her grave. We stood side by side in the snow-covered cemetery, and the daughter quietly told her mother about her life. Forgive me, she said to the headstone. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when you were dying. I'm sorry I didn't come to say goodbye. I was a different person then, a bad person. I listened and thought about the fact that this was the first time in a long time I'd heard sincere remorse from my daughter. A week after that visit to the cemetery, I called Jasper Thornton. I want to change my will. I said, to give everything back to the daughter. The lawyer clarified. No, split it in half. Half to Amelia, half to the charities. Jasper was silent for a moment. So, she convinced you no. She's changed. And it was true. The Amelia who came now was a different person. Not the selfish woman who had chosen her husband's birthday over her mother's funeral, but not the blonde-haired girl who'd grown up in our house either. Someone in between. A grown woman who had survived a fall and was trying to get back up. In March, she took the volunteer job with the same children's reading foundation to which I had bequeathed part of my inheritance. She read books to children in the hospital and helped at a library for low-income families. When I asked why, she said, I want to do what my mom did to understand how she felt. I didn't tell my daughter about changing her will. Let her build a new life, not with an inheritance in mind, but because it's the right way. This morning, Amelia called with some unexpected news. Daddy, I'm dating a man, she said. His name is Lucas, and he works as a teacher at the middle school. I'd like you to meet him. Teacher? a profession Harlan despised for its low pay. "How long have you two been dating?" "About 4 months. We met at the library when I was reading to the kids. He volunteers there, too. And he knows about our situation. About the divorce. Yes. He knows about the will, too. I told him the whole truth, both about my mom's funeral and about you disinheriting me. He said he understood you. Understands me. So, this Lucas is a man who values family ties over money. He's a good man," Amelia continued. "Kind, honest, doesn't make a lot of money. But he loves his job. Reminds me of you when you were young. This last was the highest praise from a daughter who had once been ashamed of her background." "Come on over," I said. "We'll get acquainted." After the conversation, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking of the vicissitudes of fate. A year ago, Amelia had been married to a rich man, living in luxury, and not attending her mother's funeral. Now, she was volunteering, dating a teacher, and calling her father every week. Which version was that real one? Maybe both. Maybe there are several versions of oneself living in every person, and circumstances determine which one will take over. Harlan brought out Amelia's worst qualities: greed, vanity, indifference to those closest to her. The loss of her husband and status had forced her to search for the best parts of her nature. I got up from the table and walked to the garden. Spring would soon be here, and new flowers would have to be planted. Beatrice had made a tradition of planting something new next to the old perennials every year. Life must be renewed, she used to say. Maybe she was right. Maybe families need to renew themselves, too. To forgive mistakes, to give second chances, to believe in people's ability to change. Beatrice always believed in the best in people, even in the last days of her life. She justified Amelia, hoped she would be reformed. Standing in the garden among the barely budding sprouts, I made a final decision. When Amelia arrived with her teacher, I would tell her about the new will, that she was my daughter again, and therefore entitled to part of the family inheritance, but not all of it. The other half will go to charitable foundations as a reminder that money should serve people, not the other way around. It would be a lesson Amelia would remember for the rest of her life. The sun was shining brighter. The snow was melting faster. Spring was coming to our little town in Ohio, bringing with it the hope of renewal. And I felt for the first time in a long time that our family had a future. Beatrice would be pleased. Her daughter had finally come home. It's been a year since I wrote this story. I'm now sitting on the same veranda where I spent the last few months with Beatrice, looking out at the garden, which has blossomed again. Amelia comes every weekend helping to tend her mother's flowers. We work in silence, each of us thinking about our own things. But the silence is no longer burdensome. It's healing. Lucas turned out to be exactly as I'd imagined him from my daughter's stories. A calm, thoughtful man who looks at the world through the eyes of a teacher, seeing potential in people, not just what they have now. When I told him the whole story of the will, he nodded with understanding. "Money shows a person's character," he said. "It doesn't create it. It shows what's already inside." They married in the fall. A modest wedding in the same church where Beatrice and I had been married, where she had been buried the year before. This time it was different simple flowers from our garden. A $150 dress instead of $25,000. A homemade cake instead of a tiered cake from a pastry chef. But Amelia glowed with happiness in a way she hadn't at her first wedding. "You know, Daddy," she told me at the father-daughter dance, "back then I was marrying status and opportunity. Now I'm marrying a person. They live in a small house near the school where Lucas works. Amelia runs a children's reading program at the same library where her mother once worked. They don't make much money, but they make enough." I can see my daughter blossoming in this simple life, finding joy in the little things she used to think were unworthy of attention. 2 months ago, Amelia announced she was expecting a baby. My first grandchild will be born in the fall. They want to name him Octavian, in honor of the grandmother he will never see, but whose love of books and children he will hopefully inherit. Harlan, meanwhile, has married a young girl from a wealthy family. Amelia had heard of it from mutual acquaintances, but the news did not upset her. "He's found what he was looking for," she said calmly. And I realized that my daughter had finally healed from her past. Reflecting on the experience, I realized a few important things. First, family is not about blood, but about choice, every day. We choose whether to be a family or just people connected by kinship. Amelia chose not to be my daughter for 5 years. And I chose not to be her father a year ago. Both of us had that right. Secondly, money really shows a person's character, not to spoil or improve, but to reveal what's hidden inside. The inheritance was a test for Amelia, and she failed it. Losing the inheritance was another test, and she passed it. Third, it is never too late to change if there is a sincere desire to change. Amelia was 39 when she decided to become a different person. Many people her age already consider their character to be formed, but she proved that this was not the case. Finally, and most importantly, forgiveness is not a weakness, but a strength. Or, a year ago, I thought I was being principled by disinheriting my daughter, but really I was just hiding behind pride. Real integrity is giving people a second chance when they deserve it. Beatrice knew that better than I did. All her life she believed in the ability of people to change for the better. Working with children. She had seen a bully boy become an excellent student and a shy girl become a class leader. People grow throughout their lives. She told me, only adults forget that. I'd forgotten, but Amelia reminded me, now sitting in the garden where Beatrice's roses bloom and our cat, Amelia, gave him to me for Christmas plays. I feel peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from a justly executed retribution, but the kind of peace that comes from a healed family. A daughter has found herself. A grandson is growing in her belly. The money Beatrice and I have saved all our lives will go to the continuation of the family and to the people who need it. The circle has closed just right. Sometimes in the evenings, as the sun sets behind our neighbors' houses, I think of Beatrice sitting next to me on the veranda. Not as a ghost, but as a memory of love surviving death, family surviving betrayal, and hope surviving despair. My wife was right. People are capable of change, and families too are capable of resurrection if there is patience to wait and wisdom to forgive. The story ended well. This story of Elias Hawthorne, Beatrice, and their daughter Amelia is a journey through love, loss, betrayal, and redemption. It begins with a family bound by deep affection, torn apart by choices prioritizing material wealth over emotional bonds, and ultimately healed through forgiveness and personal transformation. Amelia's decision to prioritize her husband's birthday over her mother's funeral revealed a shift in her values, influenced by Harlan's materialistic worldview. Yet, her father's drastic decision to disinherit her became a wake-up call, prompting her to rediscover her true self by leaving a toxic marriage, embracing a simpler life, and reconnecting with her family's values. The story teaches us profound lessons. First, family is defined not by blood, but by the choices we make to prioritize love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Second, money can reveal a person's true character, exposing greed or inspiring growth. Third, it's never too late to change. Amelia's transformation at 39 proves that sincerity and courage can reshape one's life. Most importantly, forgiveness is a strength, not a weakness. Elias's willingness to give Amelia a second chance mirrors Beatrice's lifelong belief in human potential for growth. This tale carries a timeless humanistic message. Love and forgiveness can mend broken bonds, and true wealth lies in relationships, not possessions. It urges us to reflect on our priorities, cherish our loved ones, and embrace second chances. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts, like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to join the conversation about life's deepest values and inspire others to choose love over loss.